everybody, welcome to Fast Track Modernization for COBOL. Focus on your data. Joe and Evaldo are back in action with our COBOL webinars. As you can see, we are working from home like most of you out there. So thanks for joining us today. I'm sure if you notice our cool backgrounds right now. You know, last time we did a live webinar series about taming the beast. As you can see here, we've tamed them and we've kind of joined them too. Evaldo, this has been a crazy few months, hasn't it?
Hey, Joe, yes, it is. And you can see right now, we are each one working from home, right? So we are remote, and therefore we're trying to record everything here in kind of an interesting way. And yeah, absolutely, Joe, it's just crazy, right? The pandemic is just completely unexpected and throwing a tantrum all over the place, right?
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, we've definitely been working from home just like everyone out there. But as most of you know, COBOL Systems has finally hit a pressure point to be modernized. A lot of these projects have been put off in the past because people thought it was too big of a project to tackle. Now some of them are put in a situation where they have to modernize now in order to stay on track. We're here to show you an easier way to fast track your COBOL data and tame the beast for your modernization project. Let's bring it to the 21st century. Evaldo, what are the main challenges for these customers when they're trying to modernize their system?
Well, as you know, Joe, every time we hear someone talking about COBOL, it's mostly about the fact that there are no more new COBOL developers available to be hired, right? That colleges are not forming new people, nobody's teaching COBOL. More recently, because of the pandemic here, we have seen here, mostly here in the US, that some government departments are struggling because they cannot hire people to keep and maintain their old COBOL systems, like for unemployment application, for example. All of this really puts a heavy focus on the challenges that COBOL imposes as a language. Indeed, if you look into programming languages overall, especially like the popularity research surveys that usually come out, or indexes, Redmonk, I think, has a very popular one that usually they publish every year. You can see COBOL language seems to be a big part of the problem. They're never there on the top 10, much less on the top 20, right? So for sure, not having new developers means that keeping and improving existing systems, it gets more expensive because you cannot hire more new people, right? It's harder to develop these applications. It increases the total cost of ownership for these applications for sure. But I honestly think this is not the right way to look at this. I think the issue here has nothing to do with the language. It has more to do with the fact that actually the COBOL data is hard to access, right? COBOL is really super important for these companies. It's critical, it's central, but the data from COBOL is the main challenge, right? So it is true for sure that many companies today are looking for easy ways to modernize the systems without necessarily rewriting them. But this means also they're switching the focus out of the programs and the language itself, the COBOL language itself, and exploring other ways to do it, which I think is the right way to go, right? So we honestly think the answer to that is on the data. Hey, I think the most problems that COBOL faces, they have to do with the fact that the data is in a proprietary format. So probably the data is also the answer for a fast track approach.
That's right. For example, Micro Focus recently published a survey with about 600 companies across 40 countries, so a very extensive one. And they found out that more than 70% of the respondents view modernization as a viable strategy to support business changes, which is very critical because these systems are still strategic for these companies and are constantly growing. The research also found out that there are about 12% more lines of code now than 3 years ago, which totally makes sense because these systems are usually a part of the core business of these companies. In fact, it is so strategic that 70% of the modernization projects are being led personally by either the CIO or the CTO, speaking to how critical they really are. I think this leads to our main point on this webinar. What is the best way to modernize a COBOL system? We strongly believe the answer is the data.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. Let's see some examples. A big one is really not having real-time data access for other systems like analytics. Okay, many of the projects we have been involved came from this need. Why is that? because in most cases, the data needed by the analytical system is actually sitting across tens or hundreds of COBOL data files that they cannot just go directly and read them. It usually requires writing extractors, maybe hundreds of them, and run daily as batch operations, filtering what needs to be extracted, and then finally deploying it on a staging area, and then finally running another set of batch operations to import it back into their BI analytics. It is costly, it's very complex, and completely not real time, taking hours, sometimes days. I had customers that took days for that, taking a long time to make the data available for decision makers. Okay? But analytics is just one system that struggles to integrate with COBOL, when I think integration is a big aspect of the problem here as well. Many other systems like the CRM or the ERP, for example, they use their own databases to store the information. They cannot easily integrate that data with COBOL. So why is that again? Again, because of the data. COBOL usually stores its data in record-oriented format, not easily accessible by relational systems, which is the case here. Usually the systems are expecting some sort of SQL interface like JDBC or ODBC. They are daily part of critical operations as well, so they are forced to treat COBOL as a separate entity, mainly because they can't get easy access to its data. The data problem goes on and on. Another good example that I like to mention here is failover, right? The lack of failover in disaster recovery strategy. Usually this is not implemented for COBOL, simply because customers cannot figure out an easy way to do it. Backups usually are done daily or hourly, manually copying files, and manually transporting them to a different place, data center or to the failover machine. But very frequently, those files are corrupted. Customers don't even know that. They create massive risk for disruption, like in a crisis mode, when they have to restore the data in the middle of the night. Again, the main problem here is making the data available in time and safely for a failover environment. So there are many problems on the data for sure. And then finally, I think a big one here is what we talked at the beginning, right? The lack of COBOL developers. We know it is a reality, no doubt, right? And we all know that it's getting harder and harder to find experienced COBOL developers. Okay, but again, why is this a problem for the data? Because if you could develop in other languages, imagine if you could create new modules like, for example, Java or Python, and they could easily coexist with your COBOL, simply because all of a sudden they have access to the data. If you consider that, if you take in consideration also the fact that most COBOL systems are stable and they don't need a lot of changes in the application itself, if you don't have to write new modules in COBOL, many of your organization's problems will be solved, right? So you could use one of your Java developers to build a new report interface or to build a web application, for example. So as you see, if we stop and think, many of the challenges of modernizing a COBOL system are derived from the fact that its data is not easily shared and accessed. It doesn't really have a lot to do with the language itself, and I think it's kind of a mistake from the market to assume that because there are no COBOL developers anymore, this is the only way for you to modernize the environment. We strongly believe that if you switch the focus to the data, that could change a lot of what you can do and create other alternatives for you to, in a fast way, modernize your COBOL system.
Those are great points, Evaldo. It's all about the data. Data, data, data. Everybody talks about the data. Most of their mission-critical data in COBOL either doesn't have access to it with modern tools, or they've created such a lengthy manual workaround that it's both costly and unreliable. Now, FairCom's been doing this for 40 years, so we wanted to share with you some of our best points. This brings us to FairCom's top 3 ways to shortcut COBOL modernization. All right, Evaldo, give it to us.
Yeah, sure, Joe. So our number 3 is SQL access to COBOL data. Let's see at that one. Yeah, so we consider SQL access to COBOL data really number 3 here in the fast track. And the reality right now is that no COBOL system has SQL access to the data. And that is a big problem for any modernization project, because most other systems, they speak SQL, right? So the fact that they don't have an easy way to query the data in COBOL is a big challenge.
So they can't query the data in COBOL?
No, Joe, they can't. It's a big problem because the COBOL data is sitting in proprietary format right now, record-oriented files, and if they want to query the data through other system, it requires a lot of effort. They have to extract the data. It's not an easy thing to do.
But don't most companies then try to rewrite the applications?
Yes, that's what they usually do, precisely because they're trying to get SQL access to the data. And that's not a good alternative. It's very risky. You have to rewrite your application. An application is okay. The application usually is working fine for many, many years. There's no need to rewrite the application. The challenge is really the fact that they cannot read the data on COBOL. But I think it's time to stop talking and see this working. So Joe, let me switch over here to our to this console on Linux here, and let me show you first this. So you can see here that what we have here is actually we have a real COBOL application up and running here. Okay, so we're gonna use this here as our example of to see how our technology works with COBOL applications. So typical COBOL application with the menus, and it's character oriented just for the sake of making it easier. And you can see I can just hit enter here and get into, for example, the vendor file. Okay, so and here right now I'm just hitting F1 and I'm browsing a set of data. Okay, so this is exactly how like typical COBOL applications work, right? So now let me get out of this application here. So we have this environment up and running. Let me show you something that is also very common in COBOL environments, which is actually the data files. Okay, so the data files here in this case are under our own folder here. Let me get down here to server and done. So you can see here, like we have several data files that are typically like in any COBOL application. That's exactly how usually the data is structured. So you can see many .dat files. This is an Anaki COBOL application, so there are also VIX files, and so you can see the index files for each one of those files. I think the most important part here, Joe, is really that you can see that the data is all over here. The one where we were browsing a minute ago, it's actually called venfil00. Okay, so in this example here today, we're not going to show how to install and convert files. This environment is already up and running with c-treeRTG. So the files for c-treeRTG are sitting under a different environment. Actually, let me show you where the data is right now. The data for c-treeRTG is actually in the folder for c-tree. Let me show you where the data is. Hold on, give me just a minute here. Let me find the data folders. So we are talking about here. So let me go over here, change this folder to this environment. Sorry, that's not it. Let's do it again. Still not it. Local. It's easier for me to type. That's for data. So you can see here, here are the files that we already converted. So I converted already 2 files here to be used with c-treeRTG. One is the vendor file, another one is the history of the vendor file. So they are in this case in separate folders. They don't have to be. In this case here, just for the sake of the demo, it's just easier to show them in a separate folder. Okay, so that is kind of the typical, just representing a typical COBOL environment, like we usually have with like our customers usually have. Okay. So let me switch over here and bring what we call our SQL Explorer interface. So as you can see, Joe, our SQL Explorer is c-treeRTG interface to connect to c-treeRTG server and give you access to our SQL server. Okay, so just so that you understand what's going on here is that we have a full SQL server mapping dynamically all the COBOL data files that you want into SQL tables. Okay, so it's a client server connection, so we have to connect it. You can see here it's all protected, right? There are port numbers. It's a server with logins and all that. So once I connect it over here, I can start to browse my SQL server, my COBOL data files as if they are being managed by a SQL Server database. Okay, so this is a full SQL Server implemented by FairCom many, many years ago. So you can see here what we have. We support pretty much every standard SQL, right? So we support store procedures, we support triggers, and if I click here on tables, for example, you're going to see that we already have venfil00 right here. And so this is venfield00.dat file that we just saw a minute ago here under the COBOL file, COBOL application, okay? We already did what we called sequelize. What does that mean? It means with c-treeRTG, it means essentially making this table on COBOL available through our SQL server, okay? And then through SQL Explorer, you can browse it and use it. So you can see all the field names here. The field names are automatically brought from your file descriptor or FD. You can customize this if you want. You can actually give different names for the fields. It doesn't really matter. And then if I hit like here in table records, you're gonna see here are the records. Okay, so these are exactly the same records on that we saw a minute ago on venfield00 on the application, but seen as in the format of a SQL table. Right. So you can see this is very, very powerful, Joe, and how easy it is to all of a sudden modernize your COBOL application by providing SQL access to your COBOL data files. I'm going to show something here, like for example, I can come over here now and I can run SQL queries. Like I want to select vendor name and address 1 from the table venfield00, and I can just run this here, and you can see I can start to query data in COBOL using our SQL interface. Okay, so this is a fantastic way, very fast, and we consider this one of the fast track options, very, very good option to modernize your COBOL environment, because the moment you do this, the moment you SQLize your table and you bring it to c-treeRTG and it's available here for our SQL server, you can not only interact through our SQL Explorer with the data, but you can also query this data using any of our SQL interfaces, okay? The most popular one for sure is ODBC, but we support JDBC, we support ADO.NET. We have many, many different access that provide access to the table, to the COBOL table, through one of the SQL interfaces. And then this is a full SQL server. So like I mentioned, we support many different features here, like triggers or store procedures and views. Views are a fantastic way to query your data. Let me show you, like, let's create a view here really quick. So I can actually come over here, create a view. Let's take venfield00, right, the table over here. And let's say I want a view that shows me only the vendor name, the vendor number, and let's say, for example, let's take something related to purchase, for example. Let's say, I want to, like, for example, the payments, like, for example, payments year to day. Okay, so I do all this, and then I can just create a table here, a view, for example, summary vendor, or vendor, let's make it a vendor summary, right? Vendor summary, for example. And once I do this, I can easily just create the table, the view. And now you can see here that we have a view. So now I can run this view and I can see the view as if it was a table. Okay, so I can just hit over here, run, and you can see we have a view from one particular table that you can actually use for whatever purpose you want. So any external application connecting to c-treeRTG right now will be able to see two different tables, venfield00 and vendor summary. Okay, so this is really very, very powerful. You can build joins, you can build queries, more restrictive queries, like, for example, using the where clause. And just by doing this here, how much time you're going to save in not having to develop new COBOL applications that would be supporting, for example, reports, or that are extracting specific data coming from COBOL, right? So this by itself, Joe, I think it's a fantastic way to modernize your application for sure, because SQL by itself is the best way for other applications to integrate with COBOL. And you can see this has all been done, Joe, with no changes in the source code at all, right? So we just actually took one of the files, venfield00, converted it, adopted c-treeRTG on top of it, and made it available on the SQL side. Okay, so I think this is a great way to modernize your COBOL application without the need to do a huge investment in rewriting or just transform your application in any ways. This is just done through the data. So now let's take from here, like you just saw a minute ago, right? So we actually just built a view here, but let's go back to Venfuel00, the table up here, and let's show how this is actually the real table, like the same data that's coming from the COBOL side. So if I go back here and I just see, you can see all the tables from this side here. We can take each one of these tables, these records here are editable, right, through our SQL interface or through an update on the SQL as a SQL command as well. So let's say I come over here and I want to change something in this record, for example, right? So I can right-click here and just do a double-click on the record, like this, for example, and I can come over here and let's say FairCom demo RTG, like in this case. When I do this here, what's going on behind the scenes is that I'm running an update query via SQL through our SQL Explorer. Like I mentioned before, I could have done this with a SQL command, for example, running an update command, or just come over here directly and update the data. So what happened right now is that I went to the same record inside Venfuel00 that the SQL Explorer is seeing, and I updated the record over there. Let's see how that changed on the passport side. Let me bring the passport application over here. Hold on. So hold on. Let me see if I can bring it over here. Let me bring the data over here. So you can see here's the application, right? The COBOL application that we're running a minute ago. Let me go back here. Just go back to the vendor file and let's open the file again. And let's just update the file again. And if I can run over here, you can see that the data just changed over here, right? So this is the same data that we saw updated here in the background. You can see FairCom demo RTG. I just updated one record on the COBOL file, right? So this shows to you that Joe, it's really, we're not duplicating the data. This is essentially the same data file that you can access the same natively through COBOL, like you are used to do, with no changes in the source code or no changes in the application, but at the same time through our SQL server, okay? And this by itself, see, by the moment you do this, by the moment you open access to SQL here, how much more powerful you get to the COBOL application, because the data now can be shared with other environments, right? So I think this is a fantastic way, Joe, and you can see like this is one of the great ways for you to modernize the application by giving SQL access to the data, to the COBOL data. And not only that, concurrently and with transaction control, you can have other applications coming over here and updating the data at the same time as the COBOL application is running on the other side, right? So you don't have to create copies of your files, or move them around to start to extract data for something else. Like if you want to bring it to a web application, or you want to bring it to some kind of report tool that wants to query the data using ODBC or JDBC or any other SQL interface, you don't have to worry about that, right? You can just point them to over here and connect to our SQL server and query the data straight ahead, okay? So this, you see a small example here. We could go on and on, like store procedures are a fantastic way, in my opinion, a great way to build server-side applications to process the data from COBOL. I think this is also an very interesting capability that c-treeRTG brings to the table, because many of the applications in COBOL, the challenge with COBOL, like we said in the beginning of the webinar, is the fact that it's hard to hire new people, it's hard to train new people on COBOL. Well, the less you have to develop new modules in COBOL, the less painful that gets. So a good way to modernize here is really, how can I build other applications or make it less development in COBOL? One of the ways is using store procedures. Right? When the store procedures, like I said, are server-side applications that you potentially don't have, each store procedure here would potentially mean less one COBOL application that you would have to write. Okay? So that is saving a lot of money and a lot of time, reducing the total cost of ownership for your COBOL application, while at the same time modernizing the whole system, because now you're focusing on data. Okay? So I think this is mostly on the SQL side that we would like to show. Let me go back to you, Joe.
Hey, thanks, Evaldo. Seemed way too simple. As you saw there, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what RTG can offer. RTG can actually convert your data. This comes standard straight out of the box, part of the magic sauce, we like to say. It's really simple to test it out on a small sampling of your data if you just reach out to us for a quick call. That's how simple it is. Evaldo, hey, I saw you used ODBC access. For example, I don't know, what do you think? Would that work for BI tools?
Oh yeah, totally, Joe. We use ODBC in this case here, but c-treeRTG provides many different ways to query the data through SQL, like for example JDBC or ADO.NET. ODBC is a simple way. It opens a big door for SQL for sure, because many systems use ODBC for communication. BI is definitely one of them, and I think that's the perfect moment for us to switch back to the demo. I think it's demo time again. So let's switch back here to our SQL Explorer interface and see what else can be done once you have SQL access to your COBOL data, okay? So to support the next steps here, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a new view, a fresh one. Let's call it like invoices. I'm gonna take advantage of the fact that we now have multiple tables here on representing COBOL data, right? So these are actually COBOL data. I have the view pre-constructed here just to save us some time. And you can see it is essentially a join between two COBOL files, one venfield00 and venhist-field4. So this view here will represent the combined data from two tables. Let's run it really quick here so you can see. So you can see some data coming from venfield, some data coming from another table here from COBOL. If I run the view really quick here, you're gonna see that it's consolidating data between two different COBOL tables. Okay, in real time, you can see the data already changed here. This is bringing the vendor FairCom demo RTG, but many others. So it's listing essentially how much invoices each vendor actually provided inside the system. Okay, so this view here, I'm gonna use now a brand fresh new view that I just created to show how I can use that to start to build more sophisticated reports, okay? And to do that, we're gonna use MicroStrategy. So let me switch over to the MicroStrategy interface here. MicroStrategy has been one of our partners for these presentations here, for this series of webinars. And I really like the application, how sophisticated it is. What you're gonna see here is essentially, there are some interfaces and some setups to be done, but I'm just gonna go really quick through the steps to show how much more you can do. Okay, so like typical BI tools, the best thing we have to do, the first thing we have to do here is to extract the data, right? So let's go over here and see all the connectors that the MicroStrategy tool provides to extract the data. We're gonna use databases, right? So just come over here and select tables. And you can see it already brings up our ODBC interface. This is preset in my environment here, but it is essentially an ODBC driver, okay? So if I can come over here, you're gonna see here, it's an ODBC driver that comes with c-treeRTG, pointing to the data that we just saw a minute ago, okay? So if I connect over here, MicroStrategy loads the tables, right? And I can come over here and load the tables again, and you're gonna see, refresh the information is connecting in real time to our database. And you're gonna see it brings all the tables over here, the views that we built a minute ago, and the invoices view that we just built. Okay, so in this case we want to use this one here. And it's just gonna take this invoice here, this view, and finish it here. And I'm gonna say import it so we can bring the data over here. So right now MicroStrategy is connecting to the c-treeRTG database and bring all the data over to the BI tool. Just keep in mind, you see, this is essentially real-time access to COBOL data, right? So the COBOL application is behind the scenes running and accessing the same files, while in the meantime, because we provide SQL interface to the data, now you have the capability to adopt something as modern as a MicroStrategy BI and integrate analytics in real time to your COBOL data. So by doing this, you just save a lot of time, right? So it's a fantastic fast-track way to modernize COBOL just by looking into the data. If you have SQL access in real time to COBOL data, you eliminate all the ETL process that goes there every day, extracts data, brings it over to some other place like a staging environment first, and then finally you have to run some routines to bring it over to another database, where finally this database will be available for something like a MicroStrategy, for some tools like a MicroStrategy BI, be able to go over there and query that, right? So from here now, you can see, like I can just take something like, for example, like I can drop state over here, and it's gonna show me like the states that we can see over there. And if I take, for example, this guy here and drop it over here, now you're gonna see it consolidates how many invoices per states. So it's running everything on top of the data of the invoice that we saw a minute ago, the invoices that we just created. So it's a fantastic way. Like, we can maybe add some additional variables, like for example the amount, so the total amount of sales for each state, and you can see from here, Joe, that with this capability, even business decision makers, they can start to query live data from COBOL without having to write a single line of code. So this by itself saves a lot of time. It addresses some of the concerns from the beginning that we talked in the webinar, where we were concerned about. You mentioned that some COBOL customers are concerned with the fact that they cannot hire new COBOL developers. Well, look at this, right? They don't need COBOL developers. They can have their own reports just because with c-treeRTG, now they have access to SQL. Okay? So this kind of concludes the benefit of having SQL access to COBOL. And you can see from here, Joe, that in many cases, I would say this by itself justifies the whole investment in this technology.
Wow, great way to close out number 3 on the countdown. Now, RTG has a lot to offer. We've really invested a lot in the product to make it easier for you so you don't have to do all the work and keep your costs down. Remember, it's all about the data. But I do have a question here. So, Evaldo, this has all been using the c-treeRTG SQL database, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm sure a lot of people are thinking out there, every one of these companies has a SQL database they've already invested. Can they use what they have? Like, how can they coexist?
Well, that's a very good question, Joe. Yeah, of course, everybody already has some kind of database inside their own environment, right? And COBOL sits kind of alone on the corner. So can we integrate this environment, c-treeRTG, with other databases? The short answer is yes. But to be honest, I think this leads us to our number 2 option here to fast track COBOL modernization. Let's take a look at that. So Joe, number 2 is definitely database integration, right? So like you mentioned before, yes, everybody's using all kinds of different databases out there. I'm sure your customers use some kind of other database as well, right?
Yeah, I think the most common one I've seen with my customers is Microsoft SQL Server.
Yeah, let's take Microsoft SQL Server. It's a perfect example. Microsoft SQL Server gives you an ability called linked server, okay? Because we give you SQL access through ODBC and other interfaces, it gets really very simple to integrate databases with c-treeRTG. But I think it's enough talking here. Let's see that in action again. Okay, Joe, so to show that, let me go back here to our demo. And let me switch over to a different interface. Okay, I want to share with you. What you see here is the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so of course, Microsoft SQL Server is a very popular database out there, and many customers use this database as a way to store the data. I'm going to show you how you can now see all your COBOL data files as if they were a database inside the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. Okay. I do have I created I have it running here in my own notebook here, and I have a table here, like some tables, like for example, warehouse table. This is kind of simulating a scenario where like there are multiple warehouses that are storing some specific products. Like for example, here's another table representing the stock, how much of each product is available on each one of these warehouses. And you can see there's a connection here between vendor number. So the information about the vendor is coming from the COBOL files. So this is trying to show here like a typical scenario where most of your data or some of your data is sitting inside a database like Microsoft SQL Server, but you have to combine this information and then query the data in real time versus information that are actually sitting in COBOL data files, right? Like we just saw. Okay, so let's see how that works. Okay, how would you do an integration using this particular environment here? The answer to that is what Microsoft calls a linked server. Okay, so you can see down here, it has the option, has the ability to do a linked server. Okay, what does that mean? It means essentially that you can have external databases running under the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio and seeing them and querying the data as an external database, okay? Which is exactly what c-treeRTG will be. So let's add a new linked server over here. So if I clicked on new linked server, here's how this works, okay? So you have to add a server as C3, let's say, give it a name, c-treeRTG, for example. I have to pick one of the drivers that Microsoft provides, like in this case, we're gonna pick the OLDB provider for ODBC drivers, okay? I'm gonna call it, I don't know, any name here, like c-treeRTG. And here's the name of the data source, which is the ODBC driver that we're trying to use, okay? In this case, c-treeRTG, okay? It's already here installed, okay? We have to set up some security login information, so we just typically use the Windows interface here, but we have to provide login to our own SQL Server database, in this case, admin, okay? We have to switch an option here for additional login information. And then we have to switch over here. We have c-treeRTG provides what Microsoft calls as RPC connection, okay? So we have to turn this on. And once I do this configuration here, hit enter, you're gonna see that we now have a c-treeRTG database sitting right here and as an additional external database, okay? So now what does that mean, right? So if I come over here and click on c-treeRTG, you can see here, like if I do a refresh here, let me just do a refresh here so we can see all the information. And if I click over here, you can see here are the tables and the views. And if I click on tables, you're gonna see our tables here, right here, okay? Event field 00, both history file tables over here. We're gonna see our views here as well, okay? So let me expand. Here are the both views that we just saw a minute ago, the vendor summary that we created originally, and also the one that we just created, invoices for the MicroStrategy demonstration, okay? So you can see here, all of a sudden, now you have your COBOL data files available to be queried under Microsoft SQL Server. Let's see how that would work. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another view. Right? So for example, I want to create a view that queries data coming from, for example, from Venfield 00, which is all the information, the records describing each one of the vendors. And I want to cross that information with, for example, a Microsoft SQL Server view, like the consolidated stock. Consolidated stock, as I mentioned before, is a list of different products and quantities available on each warehouse. And then for each product, there is an information of who is the vendor that provided that product, okay? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna create a specific view that takes information from this table here and crosses with the Venfield 00 from COBOL. And I'm gonna show them in real time. So let's create another view here. So I can just come over here and create a new view. Okay, like I'm not going to use any of these tables here, just for the sake of making it faster here. Let's bring this information from I have it ready here in my view. Let me copy and paste the view here for C-tree. The way Microsoft works in this case here is that you have to use what Microsoft calls as open query. Okay, so you can create open query here, like for example, like this, right? So if I use here like open query like this, I'm telling Microsoft to connect to c-treeRTG external database, which is right here, and I wanted to run select star from Venfield 00 and call it vendor file. Okay, so by doing this here, you can see like we automatically, it brings you vendor file up here as it's a table under Microsoft SQL Server. It brings all the fields, so it loads automatically the fields from c-treeRTG. We don't want all those fields here. Let's make something simpler. Let's just take the name of the vendor and the code, right? The vendor number, which is something we want to use. Okay, so keep it simple here, like this. But I also want to add some additional tables, right? So let's add a table. We want actually not the table. In this case, we want a view. We want the consolidated stock view. And let's drop it over here. The consolidated stock view has the vendor number, as you can see here. So now I can just come over here and make a join. So what I'm doing here, Joe, is I'm making a join between a COBOL table file, live COBOL table file, and crossing this with a view inside Microsoft SQL Server database, right? With Microsoft SQL Server data. Right, so let's select some other information here, like for example the warehouse, the product description, and this here is actually the sum of the total quantity of each product. So let's give it a name, like for example total, okay, and that's it. So let's see how this looks like, right? Let's save this here. Let's give it a name. Let's give it like cross query, cross COBOL query, okay, just to show it like we're querying data from here and there. So now we have a view over here. Let me refresh this information here. You're gonna see the view right here. And now we can run the view, and you're gonna see what SQL Server is doing here is in real time, with no need to keep copying data across spaces, right? So you don't have to extract data from COBOL. You don't have to query data from here and there. You don't have to drop information from batch systems. All you have to do is really to query the data from Microsoft SQL Server tables and c-treeRTG tables, okay? COBOL data. So you can see the column Venn name here. This information is coming from COBOL, okay, from the COBOL files. All the rest of the information here is coming from Microsoft SQL Server tables, and we're querying this in real time. So you can see here, Joe, how much more power this would bring to a COBOL system. And not only that, how all of a sudden you have modern access to COBOL data without having to touch a single line of code, right? It's a fantastic way to fast track really and modernize your COBOL environment just by changing the way you're managing your COBOL data files, okay? c-treeRTG is really makes it very, very simple to do something like this, okay?
Wow, that really looks simple, almost too simple. That's a fantastic example, and I think it's one use case that most people totally encounter. Now, extracting data seems to be like a big manual process that takes a lot of time, money, and resources.
Oh, totally, Joe. And I have customers, for example, like just extracting the data from COBOL and bringing them into their database. Microsoft SQL Server took days, you know, just running batch operations, extracting the data, importing again. It's absolutely very costly.
Now, wait a minute, Evaldo. I know RTG has a lot to offer in one package, including access to other languages. Because you've shown examples of using Microsoft SQL, does that mean people can develop in other Microsoft languages like ADO.NET?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the example you saw here is using Microsoft SQL Server linked server capabilities. And at that point, the data is available for any other application that uses that, like .NET, for example, or C#. So you can definitely take your existing applications and from now on, you start to use it. But it goes even beyond that, Joe, as a matter of fact. c-treeRTG comes with a whole set of drivers for different languages like Java, Python, C#, .NET for sure. You know, and I think that leads us to our number one main topic here, main reason to modernize, fast track modernize COBOL, okay, using additional languages. So Joe, using new languages is a fantastic way to modernize COBOL. Okay, what does that mean? It means that you don't have necessarily to rely 100% on the COBOL application or COBOL development to integrate that COBOL environment with other environments, right? So think about how fantastic it would be if you can freeze COBOL and develop every new module in Java or Python or any other language you want. Okay, and that's exactly what c-treeRTG provides to you, and that's why we kind of save that as number one here, because we definitely think it's a great way for you to modernize without having to do a big bang approach. You don't have to throw all your COBOL application out. All you have to do is use c-treeRTG, and then open up for any other language, and then develop in your language the way you want. I think it's definitely the number one modernization option here.
Well, some of that could be quite confusing to the audience out there. So how does RTG make this work?
So Joe, before we walk into our number one option to fast track modernize COBOL environment, let's step back a little bit here and see what actually we did so far, right? And how c-treeRTG is actually working. So you can see here on the screen, typical COBOL environments, they have many problems with files. Okay, so many of the challenges that our customers have, they come from the fact that the files are not being properly managed by COBOL. So that's why we say the problem with COBOL is the data has nothing to do with the language or the programs, okay? And if you put your focus on the data, it's fairly easy to modernize in many, many different ways. And this is what c-treeRTG proposes itself. So you can see COBOL applications usually have data corruption problems. Files are pretty much open. There's no security to the files because they're just sitting there on the disk. It's fairly easy. There's no access control list from user perspective. So there are many, many different issues that COBOL has today that has more to do with the data than anything else. What c-treeRTG does is essentially it replaces that, right? So we replace the file system with a more modern way to manage your files and give access to the data. So immediately we solve many, many different problems, and just by itself, you can see how much modernization that already brings to the table. We eliminate data corruption, because it's a transactional database. You have full control of who can access to the data. You can encrypt the data on disk to make sure your data is protected, especially with privacy concerns today. We have many additional capabilities, like, for example, compression and so on, right? So focus on the data. Look at the problems that data are creating for you in the COBOL side, and your life is going to change in many, many ways. So that's why we call it a fast track approach, because just by replacing the file system, you gain so much. And it's not only that, right? We just saw here a minute ago, like, for example, we saw during our demonstration that we added SQL capabilities to the COBOL data in real time. So your COBOL application keeps up and running. You get all the benefits of having a more robust file management system to control your data, and you get SQL. So when you get SQL, you immediately query your data using any of our SQL interfaces, but you also get something like analytics, like BI, or you can add new capabilities like machine learning. All these new systems, they are mostly expecting to interact with the data in a SQL way. So the moment you open up SQL for your application in COBOL, your life changes, okay? And your COBOL system gets a lot of extra oxygen just to keep going and going and going, right? It's a fantastic way to modernize this environment. But now let's talk about the number one, right? So as an extra benefit, additional benefit of adopting c-treeRTG is the fact that we not only provide SQL interfaces, but we also provide additional languages interfaces. So c-treeRTG comes with a full collection of extra additional drivers for different languages, right? We're going to see in a minute here which one they are, and I'm going to show you one particular example with our JavaScript interface, so you can access it through the web. But the benefit of doing this here is that these are native APIs, and by just replacing the file system with c-treeRTG, all of a sudden you get everything we just saw, but also you get access to new languages, okay? So this is all part of the solution. So we're not talking about something either or, right? So you have all these benefits, like you also get access to high availability, hot backup. So there are many, many additional benefits of using c-treeRTG. So overall, this is the whole picture of what c-treeRTG brings to the table. So you can see how much you get by replacing the file system and how this overall modernizes your whole environment. You notice that the COBOL application has not changed at all during the whole presentation here. We never touched the source code of the application. We don't have to. c-treeRTG does it all just by replacing the file system and putting the focus on the data. So now let's switch over to see how you can actually use additional languages to interact with the data. Let's switch over here. Give me a minute. Let me pick up that interface here so I can show you guys. So before we start this, let me show you here one important thing. While we're doing all this, the COBOL application is still in the background running, right? So we're not forcing you to leave the COBOL application while you're accessing on SQL or running your BI application, for example, okay? COBOL is still connected to its tables, and everything is still querying the data in the same way, okay? And while we're doing this, let me show you how it works. You can see in the background here, SQL Server is still running as well, right? So we still have access to the table here in the same way. If I click over here, you're going to see the records at the same time. So now let's see what you can do having additional interfaces available to query your data. Like in our case, we have many different drivers. Okay, the example I'm gonna use here is actually a JavaScript application running on a Node.js in a server running on the cloud. Okay, so we have a server on Amazon running right now, and we have a Node.js application running up there. You can see some of the code here. Okay, so in this case here, all you have to do is really to load our Node.js driver interface. Okay, and that gives you access to all the connectivity that you need to connect to the database. You can see here we give you all the methods and all the tools. Create objects, for example, right? In this case, we create an object c-treeRTG. We connect to the database over here, right? And then once you connect to the database, this application essentially queries the data on the database itself, right? So it's a fantastic way for you to just through the web, now using a new language like JavaScript or Java or any of the other ones we saw before, you can see everything you can do, right? Simple application like this immediately connects to the application, and then you have an interface to develop on the web. Let's see how that works. Let me switch over to the web application over here. So you can see here, this is an Amazon web server, like I said before, right? It's just an address here running on a server up there, and it's running the application I just showed you before. Okay, if I hit enter here, it's going to reload the data. Okay, and right now it's connecting to the database and reloading the data. Right, so you can see here just essentially showing the same data that's over there. So let's see if this is for real, right? So let me go back here to our let me change the data here and see what happens. So let's take, for example, the same data here, and let's just update the information here. For example, FairCom demo RTG webinar. Okay. So what happens if I do an update here through SQL and update a particular table up there on the COBOL? Well, first, here it's clearly updated, right? So on the SQL side, it's clearly updated. Now let's go back to the COBOL application and see what happened with the data. So I have to go back here because this COBOL application doesn't lock the records. But like if I click over here and hit enter again, I can start to browse the data again here on the same. Let me go back here one more level in the menu. Network is kind of slow here, but like going back here to vendors, hit vendors over here and start to browse the data again. You're gonna see that this particular vendor already changed its name, FairCom Demo Webinar, right? So this by itself, I can update on SQL and I can update on COBOL. Now let's go back to the Node.js application and see what happens over here. Of course, it did not change here because I have to update the data right here. So if I run it again, and re-update the data, it's going to connect to the application. It's going to connect to the database in the background. It's going to run the query again, and in a minute here, it's going to show up the data as updated. Okay, still running. Let's try again. Let's see if it actually updates this time. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see. So it updated the data, right? So this is exactly like a Node.js application connecting to c-treeRTG as a database and querying the data using one of our Node.js interfaces, right? So this is a good example of how you see, Joe, completely new language, completely new environment, but still, because you're sharing the data with other environments and you use the c-treeRTG to get access to the data, you would not have to develop this. Like if you want to develop an application similar to this one here, you would have to do it in COBOL. Well, you don't have to anymore. Now you can do it in any of the languages that I just listed before. Okay, and all those drivers, they come with c-treeRTG. Let me switch over here again. Let me bring the application back. Let me show you like how the c-treeRTG package looks like, right? So if our drivers, they are all located under the c-tree installation in this case here, which is, let me copy this guy here. So you can see here's our current package, right? You can see it comes with a folder called driver. If I go into the driver, you can see all the different interfaces that we provide. Like we provide, the one we used is coming from here, the Node.js interface. Actually this one here, this is the REST one. So we support REST interface. You can see all the additional SQL interfaces like JDBC. We have customers even getting to the level where they're using SQL Alchemy to do an abstraction layer on top of COBOL data. So completely new, modern way to develop applications without having to go through rewriting any of the COBOL environment, right? So you don't have to touch your COBOL application again. And because of the amount of drivers that we provide, and because of the power that this has to all of a sudden open up a completely new way for you to develop applications on top of your COBOL data, we consider this the #1 way to fast track. Okay, Joe, I think this is absolutely a great way for you to freeze your COBOL application, develop all new modules in any of the new languages. And like I mentioned before, we have customers doing all kinds of different environments like Python, for example, or other interfaces, okay? So that's it. That's the #1 that we consider.
I can see why this is #1. That's really exciting.
Yeah, you see, like Joel, everything you can do just by if you switch your focus to the data. I think to wrap up here is really important for us to recap, right? So switching your focus to the data in COBOL gives you a lot of additional options to how to modernize. They are all very fast because all you have to do is to replace the file system. So I think that's the conclusion of our fast track modernization webinar series here. And just to recap, the three options we gave you is like #1. Get SQL access to the data, right? So you go and through c-treeRTG, you will be able to query your data using SQL, okay? #2 is get database integration. You saw here through linked server, Microsoft SQL Server, linked server, but many other ways to do it. All of a sudden, you can see the COBOL data live inside your COBOL application. And #3, which you just saw, is open up for new languages, okay? Use other languages to query the data. If you are sharing the data on COBOL with COBOL and another language environment, you can freeze your COBOL environment and start to develop a new language. And those are all very fast and available the moment you adopt c-treeRTG.
Yeah, this has been an exciting day, Evaldo. Like I've learned a lot. I think a lot of people have too. This RTG has a lot to offer. As you guys can see on the screen there, you've got Evaldo's contact information, you've got my contact information. Pick one, choose us both. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us a message what you think about the webinar, or reach us out. Tell us about your situation. Tell us what version of COBOL you're using. It's a short situation. We can give you a quick example of how we can set it up in your environment and show you how to SQLize the data or whatever we can do to help.
Yes, and a quick reminder to everybody that watched here, we're going to send the recorded versions for this webinar, so keep an eye on your emails. Everybody that subscribed here will get a copy of the recorded versions here. And Joe, I hope they enjoyed because it was fun for me for sure.
Yeah, I like this, man. Like, we got to do more of these. So check us out for more. Go to faircom.com. You can see our previous webinars if you haven't checked it out yet. And we're going to bring you the beast still.
Yeah, there you go. Where's the Dano? Right here, right?
Right here. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, stay safe.
Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye.